Plotinus Third Ennead, 8th Tractate, on Nature, Contemplation, and the One. Introduction, The Secret of Generation. Plotinus begins with a deceptively simple question. Why does nature produce forms? Why do trees grow, animals reproduce, the stars move, and the world teem with life? His answer is striking. All things come into being through contemplation, theoria. Nature, soul, and intellect are not separate from the act of seeing. They become what they see, and in seeing, they create. At every level of being, from the highest to the lowest, vision and creation are united. The One does not think, it is beyond thinking, but its sheer presence causes Nous to emerge, filled with the forms. Nous contemplates the One and thus becomes intellect. Soul contemplates Nous and thus generates the world. Even nature, the lowest, most unconscious part of the soul, contemplates, and through the silent contemplation it shapes the physical world. I, the One. Beyond contemplation, yet source of all. Plotinus affirms that the One is beyond thinking, willing, or being. It is absolute unity, pure simplicity, the source of all yet itself unmoved and untouched. The One does not create by will or intention, it simply is, and from its overflowing plenitude arises Nous, the divine intellect. This is not a deliberate act, but a necessary consequence of the One's fullness. Just as the sun does not choose to shine, the One radiates being, and Nous comes into existence as contemplation of the One. Thus, contemplation, which becomes the defining activity of intellect, is born from the silent presence of the One. 2. Nous, the birth of intellect through vision. In Nous, contemplation becomes active self-knowing. Intellect sees the One and, in doing so, also sees itself as its image. It knows itself by looking back to its origin. From this vision arises the forms, the intelligible realities, the archetypes of all that exists. These forms are not separate objects in a mental space, they are the very content of divine thought, and through them, Nous is being itself. Contemplation here is not a passive gaze, but an eternal, living activity. Nous thinks the One by becoming filled with forms, and in this eternal vision it generates soul. 3. Soul, the motion of thought and the birth of the world. The soul, arising from Nous, also contemplates, but now its contemplation has motion. Whereas Nous is still and simultaneous, soul unfolds its vision sequentially through discursive thought and productive imagination. In contemplating Nous, soul creates the world of nature and becoming. The soul produces the cosmos not by choice, but as the natural result of its contemplation of the intelligible world. Plotinus thus reverses the modern notion of productivity as external action. For him, to contemplate is to create. The soul, in seeing forms, projects them into matter, and thus space, time, and motion arise. 4. Nature, the silent thinker at the threshold of matter. The lowest level of soul is nature physis, the formative power that organizes bodies, animates plants and animals, and creates the physical structure of the world. Though nature does not reason, Plotinus insists, nature contemplates. It does not think discursively, but it is attuned to the forms, and from this silent gaze it brings forth life. This is why natural forms, trees, shells, rivers, animals, exhibit intelligible beauty. Nature is not blind or chaotic, but a hidden theoria, a kind of dreamlike vision of the intelligible projected into the visible. Nature is thus the lowest emanation of contemplation, the final image of a chain that begins with the One. Even the earth thinks, not with reason, but with formative intuition. All life is contemplative, from stone to God. Plotinus now asserts a grand metaphysical vision. All life is contemplative. There is no division between action and vision. To exist is to be oriented toward the One, and that orientation is contemplative in nature. Even plants gaze silently toward the good by growing toward the sun, flowering with order and harmony. Animals act according to sensed forms, following instinctual patterns shaped by the contemplative power of nature. Humans have the capacity to return consciously to contemplation, to rise from discursive thought to Nous, and eventually to the One. But even the stars, even the patterns of weather and physics, are vestiges of contemplation, echoes of the divine vision from which they emerge. 6. Human contemplation, remembering our true activity. Plotinus concludes by addressing the human soul, you are not a creature of labor or utility. Your true function is not production, but contemplation. Philosophy, for Plotinus, is the recovery of our most fundamental act, not doing, but seeing. The soul does not need to generate new things, it must learn to see what already is. To remember the forms, to recognize the One, and to rest in the activity of thought. This does not mean inactivity, but divine activity, self-relation, vision, joy. In contemplating Nous, the soul is renewed because it returns to its origin. In contemplating the One, the soul is transformed because it returns to what is prior even to being. Conclusion: the world is born of vision. On nature, contemplation, and the One, Plotinus offers a majestic metaphysical picture. The One in its fullness generates Nous, not by will, but by being. Nous, in contemplating the One, becomes filled with forms and gives rise to soul. Soul, in turning to Nous, generates the cosmos, time, space, nature, life. Nature, in its own silent contemplation, forms the visible world, plants, animals, stars, and stones. All creation is an act of vision. The cosmos is not a machine, but a luminous unfolding of contemplation at every level. And for the human soul, the path home is clear. We must stop chasing images and learn to see. In contemplation, we remember that we are not makers but mirrors of the divine. And through vision, we become what we see.